Welcome to Feeding the Starved Marriage, 5 Keys to a Fat and Happy Marriage. I'm Matt Townsend. Since I started talking about using the label or title, Feeding the Starved Marriage, 5 Keys to a Fat and Happy Marriage, I've had nothing but questions from those around me wondering, how did you ever come up with a title like that? Well, let me tell you, it was quite simple. A couple came into my office one day while I was a marriage and relationship coach, and the wife was in tears, seriously contemplating ending their 16-year marriage. The husband was somewhat shocked to be in my office, obviously oblivious to the pain that his wife was going through. When I asked her what was wrong, she just went off. She said, I'm sick of it. I am so tired of him taking advantage of me. He never helps around the house. He never thanks me. He just sits around so fat and happy. When am I ever going to be fat and happy? As a marriage educator and a relationship coach, I spend all of my days working with many clients who are looking for some help in their relationships. Many come to me wanting to end their marriages as they tell me they just simply can't take it anymore. No matter how different these couples seem to be, their complaints all sound familiar. See if you have thought of any of the following in your marriage lately. I just feel so alone in this relationship. We can't seem to solve any of our problems. There are no more sparks in our marriage. We just don't have time for each other anymore. I'm so tired of the ups and the downs in our marriage. It seems like we're always either fighting or making up. If it weren't for the children, there wouldn't really be enough in this marriage to keep it afloat. When am I going to be a priority? He just won't listen, or all she ever does is talk. I just can't trust him anymore. He or she just doesn't care. In general, almost every one of these couples are suffering from the same thing, and all of them are hurting big time. Couples long for more connection in their marriages, more communication, more companionship, more common goals and purpose, more acceptance, more intimacy, and more fun. We long to have and be more with each other. So what gets in the way? An excellent quote that has guided much of the work that I do is, "That which is most personal is most universal." That which is most personal are those quiet feelings that you feel most deeply in your heart. You know, those insecurities and fears that you really don't ever want to share with anybody else. Those most personal feelings are probably, in fact, I'd even say are definitely, the most universal feelings of all mankind. Everyone has some doubts, fears, and insecurities about their life. Everyone is afraid of being embarrassed or hurt, or being left alone or unsafe. Literally, all of the things that we would all love to hide from each other, you know, those personal weaknesses, those doubts, those mistakes that you've made, are the very same things that we all share. We are all afraid of something. We all want to be able to do more, be more, and live more. We've all made mistakes that we regret. We've all offended another or felt embarrassed. We all wish we had more discipline, and sometimes we wish we had less pride. We all desire deep in our hearts to be appreciated, safe, secure, and trusted. We all want to be respected and revered for just being us. We all want to be valued, validated, and esteemed. We deeply want to feel people who are dedicated to us, not just for what we have to offer or give, but just because of who we are. So you know you've got all these things going on inside of you, and odds are, if you've brought some of these things to the marriage, then probably your spouse has done the same. Each of us, in essence, is much more similar than we are dissimilar. We have, with a few exceptions, the same chemical makeup, genetic makeup, and physiological makeup. Emotionally, we all feel mad and glad and sad and scared and surprised. And that is what I believe is meant by that quote, "That which is most personal is most universal." What I have seen is, as we struggle with our personal pains in our relationship, we tend to overlook the fact that our partner is probably going through similar pains and struggles as we are. Instead of turning to one another to understand and to connect, we begin to turn away from each other, blaming our partners for the hurt because we think we're so different and not so much alike. And as we turn away from each other at this very critical time, our actions ensure that our pains will continue and no permanent solutions will be found. Does any of this sound like your relationship? Well, if it does, then let's get into showing you how we can begin to feed your marriage and get away from these private pains. Now, there really are many different ways to make a marriage last long term. There was a great story I once read that might be one way to make it happen. A couple was celebrating a golden wedding anniversary. Their domestic tranquility had long been the talk of the town, and a local newspaper reporter was inquiring as to the secret of their long and happy marriage. "Well, it dates back to our honeymoon," explained the man. We visited the Grand Canyon and took a trip down the bottom of the canyon by pack mule. We hadn't gone too far when my wife's mule stumbled a bit. My wife quietly said, "That's once." We proceeded a little farther when my wife's mule stumbled one more time. Once again, my wife quietly said, "That's twice." We hadn't gone a half a mile when the mule stumbled a third time. My wife promptly removed a revolver from her pocket and shot the mule dead. I started to protest over her treatment of the mule when she looked at me and quietly said, "That's once." Well, that's one way to make it work. If you can't love your way through it, you can always intimidate your way through it, but there's got to be a better answer. Let's take the following test and see if we can't begin to find the root cause of some of our most basic relationship issues. I'm going to ask you a set of 7 questions. Honestly now, sit back, open your heart, and let's see if we can't figure out what's really going on in your relationship. Question number 1. Do you feel safe with your spouse? And do they feel safe with you? By safety, I mean physically, financially safe, socially, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. Number 2. Do you feel trusted by your spouse? And do they feel trusted by you? Number 3. Do you feel appreciated by your spouse? And do they feel appreciated by you? Number 4. Do you feel respected by your spouse? And do they feel respected by you? Number 5. Do you feel validated by your spouse? And do they feel validated by you? Number 6. Do you feel encouraged by your spouse? And do they feel your encouragement? And number 7. Do you feel dedication from your spouse? And do they feel your dedication? Now, how many of these basic needs are being met in your relationship? You may not have even noticed it, but these 7 needs for safety, trust, appreciation, respect, validation, encouragement, and dedication spell out the word starved. If you have answered no to 2 or more of these questions, you are probably living in what I call a starved marriage. So here's 2 questions for you. Are you in a relationship where you are starving? And is your partner in a relationship where they are starving? Now consider this idea. I feel being starved is the leading cause of every marital issue. Starved stuff is what hurts marital communication. It's also what causes pain for those around us, including our children. It ignites the fight about money and parenting issues in our children. It ignites the fights around our in-laws and sex and chores and everything else that you fight about. It's what makes us feel hopeless. Starved makes us feel depressed and makes us want to give up on the relationship. But there is good news. Even if you feel your marriage is starved and on the verge of dying, I have found that 85% of all starving marriages can be saved and can be improved. Even though your marriage may be starved today, with the help of the 5 keys we're going to discuss, it can be fed and nurtured tomorrow. But you can't keep doing what you've always been doing. How do I feel so confident that you can turn it around? Well, because I know you already know how to do it. Obviously, you already know how to feed each other because at some point in your marriage, you were excellent feeders. That is what initially attracted you to each other. Then with the kids, mortgages, job promotions, and busy schedules, the feeding stopped, the starving started, and marital dissatisfaction began to grow. Don't feel ashamed. Most marriages at one time or another are starved. The problem with feeling starved in a relationship is that you tend to starve others. Whether it is a conscious decision or not is irrelevant. Unfortunately, when you feel the pain from a lack of safety and trust, or feeling unappreciated or disrespected, or invalidated or discouraged in the marriage, you often want your partner to feel the pain as well. Being starved also affects how you see and interpret everything your partner does or doesn't do, which increases the likelihood of many misunderstandings and negatively interpreting your partner's words and actions. It is so sad because we didn't get married to starve each other. It is a habit we have fallen into. They are choices we have learned to make. Because she won't serve me, I'm not going to serve her. Because he won't feed me, I'm not going to feed him. An excellent and funny example of the unwillingness to feed your partner came from an old joke that I once read. It's about a husband who is dying of a terminal illness. The lady takes her husband to the doctor's office. After his checkup, the doctor calls her into the office and says, "Look, your husband is suffering from a very serious disease, which, combined with stress, will kill him in a few months. What you have to do is each morning fix him a nice breakfast and be pleasant. Make him a nice lunch to take to work, and for dinner, make meals for him that you know he'll enjoy. Don't give him too much to do around the house, especially after he's had a hard day. And don't burden him with too many of your problems because that will only increase his stress and, most importantly, give him a little love in his life. If you can do this for the next 10 months, I think your husband could regain his health completely." On the way home, the husband says, "Honey, what did the doctor say to you?" She looked him square in the eye and she said, "Honey, he said you're going to die." In order to feed the starved marriage most quickly, you need more deliberate and real communication around your starved stuff. You can't really meet your partner's need unless you understand where they're starving. Once you understand, you can begin to create a focus where you mutually agree upon a plan and begin to feed each other again. Throughout this program, you are going to begin with just a few of the basic keys I've discovered about feeding a starved marriage. They have been proven to feed even the most stubborn of marriages. But before we begin, there is one more thing about starving you need to understand. Some people are truly starving because their partner never feeds them. It really is that they are being neglected or unattended to. But I have also found that another major reason for starving is that sometimes people are just unwilling to eat the food their partner gives them. It's not that their partner isn't trying or working hard enough to feed them or to love them their way. It may be a matter of missed expectations, where one party is looking for filet mignon and instead they're getting meatloaf. Or on other cases, one partner may have just been too hurt in the past to eat anything from their partner's kitchen. Either way, this audio is about creating an opportunity for you to explore what part of the starving problem belongs to you. If you feel you are truly being starved in the marriage, please don't assume that it's only your partner's fault. In most cases, I have found that starved marriages are really more about mutual infliction of pain and neglect. And as soon as you can see your side of the problem, you're both much more likely to fix it and to let the feasting begin. So let's do a quick rundown now of 5 keys to a fat and happy marriage. The first key we're going to talk about is to learn to fight the fire, not the smoke. Second, energize solutions, not the problems. Third, recognize your ruts. Fourth, change your future, not your past. And fifth, focus on a healthy marriage as a whole marriage. Now, as you can imagine, there is really no way in 1 hour to cover all of the complex issues that go along with starving each other. But we do want to give you a taste of some of the principles in which I am absolutely confident. These principles work. I have seen them at play with literally thousands of couples. But remember, they can't work if you don't work them. So let's get going. The first key, fight the fire, not the smoke. Have you ever been up in the mountains at a campout where you're standing around the campfire and no matter where you sit, the smoke always seems to find you? Some try to fight it a little, waving their hands or twisting their head in an effort to find fresh air. Others just walk away, finding a more comfortable spot on the other side of the fire, calmly waiting for a shift in the wind that will eventually bring the smoke back in their face and force their next move. For me, smoke has become the perfect metaphor for many irritating and choking issues that couples seem to fight about in their marriage. Here are just a few that researchers tell us are most common. See if any of these issues have made their way into your marriage. How about money? Conflicts around money is the number one thing couples fight about. Do you guys have so much money that you are constantly fighting about how to spend it? Boy, wouldn't that be a great problem to have? Unfortunately, the problem with money is usually that we don't always have enough to make ends meet. Money conflicts also tend to spread into differences about how we spend the money. One of you may be a spender and the other a saver. The next issue are kids. As the father of 6 wonderful children, I totally relate to the smoke that these little bundles of joy bring to our relationships. In fact, every time we have ever had a new child, it seems like a brand new smoke bomb goes off in our marriage. Some researchers claim that every child you have decreases marital satisfaction by 20%. That puts my wife and I down to a negative 20%. Kids are expensive. They take time and they take energy. And many times, sadly to say, they're cuter than your partner, so they tend to get the attention more easily. And in many cases, you know it and I know it, they're smarter than both of us put together. Kids also create potential conflict with discipline and parenting techniques. They also have an innate ability to divide and conquer. The next issue is communication. Have you noticed differences in how each of you communicate? Generally speaking, researchers have found some pretty amazing differences between the communication needs of men and women. Men might prefer a more matter-of-fact or data-heavy conversation where we get to solutions more quickly and then we implement those solutions. While women statistically might find more joy in an open discussion, where understanding and mutual sharing tends to be more valuable than just solving problems. With these and numerous other differences in how we communicate, conflict around communication in marriage seems inherent. Next, we're going to talk about another common issue, namely sex, or the lack thereof in our relationships. Many times the man tends to be branded as the horny one, and the woman plays the contrary role as the headache. Lately in my coaching, though, this couldn't be further from the truth. More and more I am seeing women complaining about their husband's lack of interest in the bedroom. Obviously, there are many contributing factors to this problem, namely time with each other, kids running in and out, work stress, schedules, expectations about our intimate roles, drives, and communication. Sex seems to be another universal issue plaguing marriage. How do we get so far apart on this issue? Don't you remember back in the day when you both couldn't keep your hands off each other? Now look at us. How about work, time, and schedule issues? This is a very common problem for many couples. Does your partner's work impact the marriage? Are they spending too much time away or not enough time? Does this impact other things like money or getting some help around the house? Do you hear complaints in your marriage like, "We never do anything together anymore. When is it my time to go out and play?" Was your last date together one of the children's soccer games or a quick bite to eat after parent-teacher conferences? Finally, how about hobbies? How can something as fulfilling as a hobby bring conflict into your marriage? Well, if your spouse is an avid golfer or a hunter or training for a marathon, you have no problem answering that question. How about a partner that plays video games or surfs the web? Sometimes our hobbies begin to show our partner that something is more important or at least gets more attention than they do. Now, obviously, we haven't been able to name every problem your marriage might have, just the biggest ones. Almost without exception, every time I meet with a new couple, these are the issues that they are bringing up. These are the topics that they tend to argue about, and these are the irritating issues that they feel are tearing their marriage apart. Remember the campfire metaphor we were talking about earlier? I have found that all of these issues that we've been talking about tend to become the smoke in the marriage. They are the smoke that slowly still our ability to breathe in the marriage and begin to sap the energy from every couple. These issues might make it difficult to breathe. They make us choke a bit, and at times they even make our eyes water. But in all honesty, I believe that most of the time when we are arguing about issues like money, communication, kids, sex, hobbies, in-laws, or whatever, we're fighting about the wrong things, and nobody even notices it. Just like the smoke these issues bring, come in and irritate us for a minute or two, they then dissipate, only to reappear a few weeks or months later and irritate us all over again. In marriage, every couple suffers with these same smoky issues that irritate the relationship. But where there is smoke, there is always fire. So now that you know about all the smoke in your marriage, it's time to figure out, where is all this real heat coming from? The fire that is burning below and causing all of this smoke and stress is really what we introduced when we started out this program. The fire really is the starve stuff. And that's what we're going to talk about now. Now let's do a more detailed review about the starved needs. Remember, we talked about the starved needs being safety, trust, appreciation, respect, validation, encouragement, and dedication. Let's first talk about safety. In your relationship, do you feel safe with your partner? This means, do you feel financially safe, for example, or physically safe, emotionally safe? Are you sure that you're going to be physically protected and taken care of? Safety is of primary importance. You need to feel safe with your partner, and they need to feel safe with you. That's why money is such an issue of conflict. When you don't feel financially safe, you argue about money. If you have all the money in the world and still don't feel safe financially, then you fight about how you spend your money. So money might be the smoke or what we fight about, but the real issue is safety. And if you don't deal with that, you're going to be fighting over money for a very long time. The next issue is trust. You need to have trust in a relationship. Long-term relationships require it. Do you trust your partner's integrity and honesty? Do you trust their ability to create a strong relationship? Imagine what happens to trust every time your spouse walks in the door and you say, "Where have you been?" Trust is a huge issue. Affairs and pornography and lying and gambling problems, any kind of addiction, rock a marriage to the core because they tend to destroy trust. We might just argue about the smoke issues, but the core issue is trust. Appreciation. How many of you feel appreciated in your marriage? How many of you can even remember the last time you heard your partner say thanks? "Hey, thanks for that dinner, it was great." Or "Thanks for mowing the lawn, it looks awesome." Remember when you were dating and you always said thank you? No, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you. All of us need to feel that someone notices us and appreciates our efforts. Respect. How many of you feel respected in your marriage? How many of you respect your partner? Do you even remember the last time you asked your spouse for their opinion? Or have you learned by now not to do that anymore? And when you ask them and they give a great opinion, do you ever respect it and recognize it? "Gosh, that's a great idea. We're going to use that idea." Do you give a lot of suggestions around the house and nobody seems to be taking them? A man literally broke down crying in my office and said to his wife, "Can't you just respect me as the father of the house?" His wife then quickly said, "Yeah, I'll respect you as soon as you," and then she gave a list of things he had to do. Encouragement. Do you feel encouraged in your marriage? How many of you are still supporting your spouse on their fourth new business venture? "Yeah, you go, honey. This time it's going to be different. I feel it deep. I know this one will work. Seriously." Do you encourage your spouse to do things that interest them? Encouragement comes when we can support and empower the dreams of our partners and their desire to grow. Now, obviously, you don't need to be walked on over and over, but does your partner receive more encouragement from you or discouragement from you? Dedication. Last but not least, do you feel dedication in your marriage? Dedication comes when we know our partner is truly committed to us no matter what. Far too many times I have seen couples sit and list 2 or 3 things that they would immediately leave their partner for. In my eyes, you just shouldn't be thinking about what you would leave your partner for. Instead, you should be spending much more time thinking and showing your partner why you are so committed to them. I've also found that when couples are starved, they are way too quick to bring up the idea of divorce or separation. One reason they do is because it's an option. I have always wondered how many marriages could be improved and changed if divorce wasn't an option. Obviously, some would live the rest of their lives in misery, but others would probably begin to change knowing they had no choice but to improve it. Now remember, the title of this section is to focus on the fire, not the smoke. Couples tend to spend all of their time and attention fighting over the smoky issues that neither one will ever be able to get the other to agree to. I had a couple, we'll call the Smiths, come into my office who were seriously considering getting a divorce. As we sat down to discuss what was happening in their marriage, I asked the wife to tell me what is causing so much tension that they would consider ending it all. She quickly replied, "My husband is lazy. He never finishes anything he starts. In fact," she continues, "he started working on a bathroom but never finished it. I haven't had a bathroom door for years. I'm just tired of it." So is this couple actually looking to end a 17-year marriage over a bathroom door? Probably not, but I wanted to check, so I asked them, "If we get someone to hang that door, would you want to stay in your marriage?" "No," she quickly replied. "It all goes deeper than that." So notice, when she presented the issue, she initially started talking about the bathroom door. But we know that that is just smoke. Let's try to get down to the actual fire then. What was the real issue? Was it that she didn't feel safety? Or was it that she couldn't trust her partner? Was it about appreciation, or being respected, or being validated, or being encouraged in the marriage? Or was it about dedication? You see, in the end, she confirmed to me that she didn't feel he appreciated her, or he would have finished her bathroom door many years ago. She didn't feel respected because she had no private time, or she never felt validated because she would always complain about it and he never did anything. His lack of movement made her also feel discouraged. So her issue really wasn't a door issue, it was really a starved issue. And when her husband heard it that way, he was finally moved and he finally understood her. Forever they fought about the door, but instead the issue was really about his wife feeling unappreciated. Instead of just fighting about the issues, take a step to create a true change in the way you and your partner relate. The minute you see things heating up in your marriage and the smoke starts to appear, quit fighting about the issue and try to understand where your partner might be starving. If you listen long and hard enough and sincerely ask them to help you see how they are starved, you will see an amazing change in the relationship. In fact, the very act of trying to understand someone's pain is a means to feeding them. Every issue creates starved stuff. For example, when we fight about money, we might do it just because we don't feel safe. Sometimes when we fight about sex, it's nothing to do with sex. It's more about not feeling appreciated or not feeling respected. Some couples fight about their in-laws because they don't feel appreciated by their in-laws, or they feel like their spouse is more dedicated to their parents than they are to them. When we fight about time, I've seen that be a lot about respect and dedication to the marriage. Sometimes when we fight about communication issues, it really may be more about safety. Maybe we feel unsafe with our partner and how they talk to us, or maybe we don't feel respected by their tone of voice. When we fight about hobbies, it's usually not hobbies that's the problem at all. It's not about the baseball or our book clubs or anything else. Sometimes our hobbies are more about people feeling unappreciated because they don't get the time with you that your friends might get with your hobby. In order to begin to feed our marriages, or at least improve the conditions of our relationship, you need to start by understanding what needs aren't being met and recognizing when this is happening in the relationship. When you fight about the details of a story, you often miss the most important point, that behind all of those details are your partner's feelings. You keep fighting about the content, but miss the feelings, and even more importantly, you miss the starved stuff. By getting to the starved issues with your spouse, you will begin to build trust and confidence with one another. That increased confidence opens wider the channels of communication and allows greater ability to see the fire or the real issues of the marriage. So remember, fight through all the smoke and get down to the real starved stuff by asking yourself, does my partner feel safe, trusted, appreciated, respected, validated, encouraged, and dedication? And what can we do right now in this conversation to help them feel those things? The second key to feeding the starved marriage is to energize solutions, not problems. As I work with couples, I not only help them to learn about the starved stuff, clear away the smoke, and decipher the real fire issues, but I also help them find solutions to the real problems. Couples that are truly starved need to see progress and change in their ineffective patterns. I have found that the great changes come when we find a solution that works for the couple, and most importantly, when we begin to diligently work toward that solution. There is a difference between marriage coaching and marriage counseling or therapy. The biggest difference between coaches and therapists is the approach to change. I have found that with any issue in marriage, there are basically two approaches you can implement in order to create change. The first approach is what I call a problem-centered approach. This approach is probably the most common approach utilized by couples because it's the most common approach used by the world. Just as doctors begin their diagnosis with a thorough review of the problem or complaint, therapists tend to take clients deep into their past in order to better understand their current problems. Business consultants hold meetings and interviews with their clients and their employees in order to gather enough data about the problem to thoroughly solve the underlying issue. The underlying belief that pushes such a focus on the problem is the basic paradigm that in order to fix a problem, you have to thoroughly understand it. Another more subtle belief is that the more we know about the problem, the more likely we are to see the actual root cause. We believe that once the root has been uncovered and eliminated, the issue might go away. But what I have found in my own practice working with couples is that nothing could be further from the truth. You may spend hours and hours talking about the problem, but I have found, and check this against your own experience, that the more you talk about your marital problems, the more problems you start to see. You get in a cycle of constantly fighting about every single thing, and no solutions are ever created that actually change your conditions. When this happens, you slowly dig yourself deeper and deeper into the problem mindset, and you feel less and less able to actually change anything. Quite honestly, most of the couples I work with that are truly struggling can't afford months of negative talk about their problems. They just don't have the reserves to sustain it. I firmly believe that people don't increase marital satisfaction by thoroughly exploring all of the problems they have. Instead, all marital satisfaction comes from implementing solutions that feed the marriage. We need to remember that most of the real problems we face are actually just the starved stuff, like a lack of safety or a lack of trust. Once we understand that, we don't need to spend hours arguing about how we were starved or who starved the other first. Wouldn't it be silly for two people dying of starvation to continue talking about their hunger pains or how the starvation started or who the first was to not feed the other? Instead, shut your mouth and grab a sandwich and start eating. That's a solution that gives energy and hope to more thoroughly deal with our deeper issues. One of the bigger issues I've found with having too big of a focus on problems is that sometimes our problems, and the more we discover our problems and talk about our problems, the more we start to make an excuse around our problems. And if there's one thing that I've found and feel very strongly about in a marriage, and listen to this equation, is that a happy marriage does not equal an unhappy marriage with a great excuse. So now I'm sure you're asking, if we can't just sit down and talk about the problem and explore it, then what do we talk about? Well, I would suggest that you start out by asking the following question. How will I know that I no longer have this problem? What will it look like once I fix the problem? You see, the only way that you can actually know that you have a problem is if you know that there's a better way, right? You have to know the dark to know the light. You have to know the good to know the bad. So if you obviously know what the problems are, then you gotta know what some of the solutions are. Time and time again in my office with clients, I usually ask them that question. When somebody tells me that they have a hard time communicating in their relationship, and they start to give me many examples of the problem, I usually stop them right away, and instead I ask, "Hey John, how will you know that you and Stacy no longer have a problem communicating?" And you know what they do? It's the most amazing thing. They look at me, stunned. They think a minute, and then they give me an answer like, "Well, we wouldn't yell at each other as much." Or, "Well, we'd be able to have a discussion and it won't turn into a fight." Those are solutions. And I love it when they give them to me because you know where those solutions came from? John and Stacy. Those aren't solutions I'm handing them. And I found if they find their own solutions, odds are they're going to be able to implement them so much better than I ever could. And now that we know what their two solutions are, you know what we start to work on? Let's work on those solutions. If I help them, I can help them find some ways to get around talking so they don't have to fight. But you know what? You can find these solutions to your own marriage in your own discussions, but you got to be asking the right questions. And what are the right questions? You've got to get clear on how you will know that your marriage is healthy and not broken. So specifically, what will we see that will show us that money is no longer a problem in our marriage? What will we see that our kids are no longer impacting negatively how we relate with one another? What will we see that will tell us we no longer have communication problems? What are the solutions that will show me that we're happy? And once we've asked all of these questions, we have to make sure that we don't just come up with very general ideas. For example, how will you and your partner know that you're no longer having issues with the children? An answer might be, well, we'll be able to discuss the children without it turning into an ugly argument. We'll be able to discuss the children without one of us leaving the room. We'll be able to discuss the children without us calling each other names. Now we've just identified a bunch of different solutions. Then what I suggest is once you've got those solutions, you need to hold each other accountable to those solutions. Then we need to have follow-up communications or follow-up discussions. And we're going to discuss how are we doing on our solutions about not fighting around the children. Once we have the solutions and we're following up, we just make changes, but we continually work on the solutions. It is the solutions that move us forward, that help us progress, and that give us hope that change can truly happen. The third key to a fat and happy marriage is to recognize your ruts. There is a great sign I've heard about at the entrance to the Alaskan Wildlife Reserves, this expansive holding of untouched nature up in Alaska. The sign says, "Choose your rut carefully. You'll be in it for hundreds of miles." That saying could never be more true in our marriages and relationships. Choose your ruts in your marriage carefully because you'll be in them for a very long time. There is nothing that can starve a relationship faster than negative relational habits, or what I call ruts. The ruts are the ways that we deal with conflict. Now you got to know something about conflict in marriage. Conflict in marriage is completely normal. And by the way, so are ruts. But the problems in marriages don't come from the conflict. They come from our inability to effectively handle the conflict. Every marriage has conflict, but not every marriage has major struggles dealing with it. The deeper and deeper that we get into ruts, we start to become more unwilling to feed each other, and many times we can't even see we're in the rut until it's too late. I have found through my work with couples that there are 5 basic ruts that all but guarantee an inability to create a happy relationship. Now the first 2 ruts out of 5 that we're going to talk about go hand in hand and end up creating most of your communication problems. Rut number 1 is the rut of being a pursuer. Generally, in many marriages, there tends to be one person in the marriage that we'll call the pursuer. We might also call him the talker or the fighter. The fighter, simply put, is an aggressive communicator who is looking for answers in order to feel safe in the relationship. Now, for every time we have a pursuer in the marriage, we tend to also find rut number 2. Rut number 2 is the withdrawer. The withdrawer is literally the opposite of the pursuer. We might call them the walker and, at times, the flighter. The withdrawer basically is seeking safety by withdrawing from any stressful conversation. In your marriage, do you have a pursuer? The pursuer tends to be a little pushier. They're the one that wants to talk about your issues. Whoever is the communicator tends to be the pursuer. Statistically, more women are pursuers because they communicate better generally. But pursuers are not always women. The pursuers want answers. The minute an issue comes up, the pursuers want to deal with it. If there is a pursuer in a marriage, there tends also to be the withdrawer. Whereas the pursuers want answers, the withdrawers want safety. The pursuer is the talker and the withdrawer is the walker. So we have talkers in the marriage and we have walkers in the marriage. Walkers usually have their legs moving, talkers usually have their mouths moving. This is one reason we become so polarized on every issue. The pursuers chase the withdrawers and the withdrawers run away. The one is only running because the other is chasing, and the chaser is only chasing because the other is running. It's a vicious cycle. So, what is the answer? Well, the answer is really very simple. It's just to stop and to understand. The pursuer's job is to quit chasing, and the withdrawer's job is to quit running. And if either one of you would do that, we might start to have a more peaceful conversation. So the first stage is where the pursuer chases the withdrawer. Once the pursuer corners the withdrawer has a choice. Let's say it's midnight and the fight's been going on. The withdrawer now has a choice. The withdrawer can either completely withdraw by leaving the house or going to sleep or saying I've had it and not talking to each other. Or sometimes, and this is a scarier time in the relationship, the withdrawer comes back as a pursuer, and then the two pursuers collide. When two pursuers want answers, the result is an explosion. After the explosion, the issue, whatever it was that they were talking about, falls to the ground unresolved, along with every other issue that you try to discuss. Both people then withdraw after that fight, and they both feel in their heart that they have now learned that we can't talk about anything, so why try? This pattern is a guarantee for polarizing your marriage on many issues. How do you overcome it? Well, you need to figure out a way to have a conversation that's safe, where the withdrawer can't run anymore and the pursuer provides the safety. These two ruts of pursuing and withdrawing is a guarantee for polarizing your marriage on any issue. How do you overcome it? You need to figure out a way to have a conversation where the withdrawer gives the answers and the pursuer provides the safety. That way, both of your needs are met. The third rut is reactivity. Reactivity simply means that the decisions that are being made in the relationship are based on our moods, circumstances, and events instead of being based on what's most important. It's the reactivity, by the way, that drives the other two ruts. It's the reactivity that makes us want to pursue and makes us want to run. A great example of reactivity is a dog. Dogs don't chase their tails because they're smart. They chase their tails because they're reactive. The minute they see the stimulus of that tail wagging, the reactive dog will jump on that tail and chase it until he gets a hold of it. Then he'll bite himself, realize it hurts, let it go, and forget about it until he sees his tail wag again. There's nothing like reactivity in a marriage that keeps the marriage stuck in the rut. At some point, we have to start making decisions based on what's the most important thing for this marriage? What's the most important thing to make this marriage work and to feed my partner? The fourth rut may very well be the most dangerous to all of the marriage. It's called negative interpretation, and for many experts, it's seen as the death knell in the marriage. Negative interpretation is what happens to us when we start to see everything that our partner does as negative. After years of starving in a marriage, after having issues with pursuing and withdrawing, after reacting to each other for so long and feeling so down, it's so easy to negatively see each other. The problem with negative interpretation is it doesn't really matter what your partner is doing. If they are truly trying to improve the relationship and you have a rut or a habit of negatively interpreting them, then it doesn't matter what they're really doing because you will always see it negatively. The other problem with negative interpretation is as long as you're interpreting what they're doing negative, you will also be feeling negative feelings about your partner. The final rut is the rut of self-fulfilling prophecy. It's our expectations. If we expect that we're going to fight in our relationships, predict what we're actually going to do. There is nothing more consistent than our thoughts leading to actions. And if I think I can't discuss things with my partner, then I'm absolutely right. And if I think I can't discuss things with my partner, then I don't. And if I don't discuss things with my partner, then odds are they might start pursuing me. And off we go again, fulfilling my expectation of a fight. So, how do we get out of these ruts? Well, quite honestly, there's no easy answer. But the key is we both need to be working on it. So change is inevitable, but the question is, who will go first? What I have found in my coaching is you have to start to identify the ruts, and somebody's got to choose to go first. Who's going to be the first person to not pursue or to not withdraw? Who's going to be the one that won't react to their partner? Who's going to start positively interpreting their partner? And who's going to start expecting that we can have a conversation that works? Get out of the ruts. If you need help, pull each other out. One of the greatest rules I've found is 2 heads are better than 1, but 1 head is better than 0. All we need to save this marriage is one of you to keep your head in the game and keep out of the ruts. The 4th key, change your future, not your past. Without fail, one of the biggest errors that struggling couples make is that they tend to focus on the past. When you spend time concentrating on the past events that have drawn you apart, you end up arguing endlessly over your interpretations of the past. It usually turns into a he said, she said argument. These arguments deal with the past, and the past is, well, past. It's no longer in your control, and you both have your own versions of the story. If you try to solve today's problems with yesterday's memories, you quickly find that the memories are too subjective and too biased to be used to make sense of your highly strained relationship right now. Arguing about the past unfortunately validates your suspicions of your inability to clearly communicate, and the distance between you is increased. Arguments about the past are where the age-old activity of memory matching comes into play. Memory matching may be the most common problem seen in a marriage. In memory matching discussions, the objective is to go backwards to live out of the past. Living out of the past is problematic for various reasons. First of all, you can't change it, so why focus on something you can't change? Second, you both have your own interpretation of the events. If you don't see it the same way, how can you effectively discuss it? Third, the past of your marriage is not where it has its potential. All of its past is used up. All of the potential in your relationship is in the present and the future. Think of this very important quote. When you live out of the past, you are bound to that which is finite. When you live out of the future, you are bound to that which is infinite. Your future has infinite potential, but with your past, the bounds are already set. We all tell stories about what happens to us. Usually, when we tell a story that could reflect a negative light on us, we fail to tell the whole story. We only tell part of the story to make ourselves look good because we want to feel better about ourselves. In a starved marriage, you tend to start looking for someone to blame for all your problems in the relationship, or an excuse, and you create a story of starvation, we call it. Telling ineffective stories or even focusing on stories just re-entrench you back into your old flawed thinking. Usually the stories are very self-serving, and as long as you think they matter, you keep telling them and believing them instead of changing. Unhealthy stories create the same future as the past you have been living. If you keep experiencing the same garbage in a marriage, odds are it's because you are in a pattern of reacting and negatively interpreting your spouse's actions. You probably also are not telling yourself or others the whole story. You and your spouse are probably both telling stories where you each are not to blame. As long as the behavior continues, you are bound to repeat it. Generally, when we tell our stories, there's 3 very basic types of stories we tell. First, we make ourselves the victim and we tell the victim story. The victim story usually includes the many ways that we've been a victim in our relationship in the past. Second, we might tell a villain story. Being a victim isn't just enough. We want to make our partner be the villain of the story. We make our partners out to look as bad as we can. We need somebody to be the mean, evil, aggressive villain. And the final story we sometimes tell is the hero story, where we're only putting up with certain things because we want to be the hero to the family, because of the children, or because of whatever reason. No matter what stories we tell, we've found that unless the story is healthy or whole, we're never going to break through the old traditions of the story. Stories of starvation keep you from feeding your spouse. The reality is that it doesn't matter why you don't feed each other. Each of you is starving. What would the court say if you weren't feeding your children every day? You would respond to the judge, well, I intended to, but I got busy. Really, our stories don't matter. It doesn't matter why we're not feeding each other, and it doesn't matter why we choose to be so ineffective. The reality is, we're still starving. I have a basic rule when I coach my clients about their stories. I don't really want to know their story or the reason why. Because quite honestly, if I'm on a 4-story building and I jump off, you can all predict what will happen. Splat. But what if the wind blows me off? Splat. But what if I slip off? Splat. What if I'm thrown off? Splat. It really doesn't matter why, so quit fighting about it. Does anybody think that if we're falling off a 4-story building, we're going to feel any better if I knew I was a victim? Or if I had a villain that pushed me off? Or if I did it to be a hero? Splat is splat is splat. And I found if we keep living out of the past, you know and I know we're just doomed to repeat it. The 5th key, a healthy marriage is a whole marriage. When you look up the word healthy in the dictionary, you find out that it comes from the same root word as hale and hearty, which means whole. Therefore, anytime I think of creating a healthy relationship or marriage, I usually think of that as a whole relationship or a whole marriage. In order to feed the whole marriage, I have found that there are 4 essential areas that must be nourished if you're going to create a fat and happy marriage. The 4 areas to feed and nourish are your heads, your hearts, your hands, and your hopes. When I'm coaching a couple that is showing signs of starvation, I can usually see that it is a breakdown of at least one of these 4 areas. In my workshops and private coaching, we literally spend more than 12 hours alone just exploring the details of each of these 4 sections. Now, we don't have time to go into that depth, but I do want you to get a taste of how critical our heads, hearts, hands, and hopes are to the marriage. Heads. Get your head in the game. When we're talking about getting your head in the game, we mean just that. I can't tell you how many couples get to the point of divorce simply because they weren't paying attention to their marriage. The foundational principle that governs the head section is the principle of character. In order for a marriage to thrive and grow, both parties have to possess the character and discipline to stick to their commitments, regardless of what their mood or feelings are on any given day. Character is critical to fulfill the starved needs of our partner. It helps us to suspend our need to be right, to give our partners the benefit of the doubt, and to begin to turn potentially negative situations into positives. As character is exercised and strengthened, then its natural result is a greater sense of mutual trust in the marriage. Couples with character and mutual trust recognize these few basic choices that govern their marriage. Choice number 1, they recognize that they need to be respecting, not reacting to each other. Simply put, we need to learn to respect your partner for who they are and stop reacting and blaming them for your pain. Choice number 2, we need to know that we're choosing our lives, not just chancing it. Choose the life you want to have with your partner and quit leaving your happiness up to chance. Hearts. Get to the heart of your most important issues. The next area we're going to discuss is the heart section, which is about understanding the hearts of your partners and being able to effectively share your own heart. One of the most complicated issues in relationships, and is usually listed in the top 3 complaints of any of the clients I've ever had, is communication. The differences between men and women in this regard are probably at the root of the problem. We all just have very different needs, skills, and styles to connect with those around us. As the spirit and skills of communication are developed, the natural byproduct is a greater sense of mutual understanding for one another, which can feed so many of the starved needs in your marriage. Getting to the heart of your issues is about getting real with your partner and learning to explore not just their smoke, but their starved stuff. It's also about utilizing both verbal and nonverbal data to build trust and lower your partner's emotions. It's also about influencing your partner by showing them that you're willing to build solutions together. Hands. Serving hands, not starving hands. The third area we'll discuss that is critical to creating a healthy and whole approach to feeding the starved marriage is the hands section. The hands section is really all about serving hands, feeding each other, and loving your partner the way your partner wants to be loved. Sometimes after many years of starving each other, we tend to lose all desire to serve our partner. I have found 3 things that are important to serving in a marriage. First, we have to have the will to serve and the will to be served in our marriage. I've found that any marriage where there is still a will to love or a desire deep down to be loved, that's a marriage that we can feed. It's one of the first questions I ask my clients when they walk into my office, is there still a will? But without the will, in many cases, we won't spend the time to find the way. Next, once we have the will, we've got to know the way to serve our partners. Without a doubt, one of the biggest reasons that there isn't a lot of service going on in some marriages is that we just don't know the way to our partner's heart. We think that they want to be loved the way we do, And my experience tells me that most starved couples do not communicate and sense love the same way. Everyone senses love differently. Some like to be touched to know they're loved, and some use the sense of hearing. They need kind words and I love yous. Others just want to see that they are loved with their spouse taking out the garbage, or dressing up for them, or receiving gifts. Finally, I found that some people just need to know that you're paying attention. Really, for some, they don't care what you say, do, or touch. They just want you present with them, eye to eye and heart to heart. Once you know the way that your partner likes to sense love, whether it's through their sense of hearing, through their sense of seeing, through their sense of touching, or through their sense of presence, you then need to act on that. And when you act on that, you'll be loving your partner the way they want to be loved. Finally, if you've got the will and the way is clear, then you both need to be willing to receive the love that your partner sends. If you don't accept their love, they'll know that they're not good enough to be sending it. At some point, we've got to be willing to accept our partner's love, even if in the past it wasn't the way you wanted it. The fastest way to kill your partner from loving you is to not accept their gifts when they give them. Hopes. Reaching, not retreating. The final section we're going to talk about is feeding our hopes. One of the greatest ways to feed our hopes is to get our hopes together, to get on the same page, to have some goals that are united and a purpose that we both share. Another powerful tool that helps us build our hopes is when we can build some solutions together. When our solutions are actually directed at our long-term goals. Nothing creates more power and more hope than having some mutual goals that we share, having a very realistic approach to how we're going to get there, and acting on those goals every single day. As life begins to change around us, as our kids grow up, as we win and lose games, as jobs come and as jobs go, our hopes are what will keep the fire alive in the marriage. Our hopes of a greater future and of a better tomorrow and of a shared today. As we're about to end this program, I hope you've been able to find that there is hope in marriage, that marriage is good, that marriage is valuable. When I was a child, my parents were divorced, and I learned very quickly the pains of what divorce can do to a family. I literally remember as a child praying in my bedroom as I listened to my parents arguing out in the front room. I wish so badly as a child that my parents could have learned about some of the things that we had here. Now, they were doing the best they could. They were doing the best they knew how. But the more I've studied this, I know that you can truly change a marriage, that marriage is valuable enough to work for, but it is a lot of hard work. The 5 keys that I found that are most likely going to change your relationship, the 5 keys we've gone over here, honestly are the best start I think you can have to making a fat and happy marriage and to feeding that starved relationship. Remember what they are. The first key, fight the fire, not the smoke. There's no reason chasing something that isn't the cause of the problem. Number 2, energize solutions, don't energize problems. Please focus on what you know you need to do, not how bad you're acting. Third, recognize the ruts. Recognize the things that keep you from being more productive together in your conversations. Fourth, focus on changing your future, not your past. Remember, your future is filled with potential. Your past is already spent. And finally, a healthy marriage is a whole marriage. Remember the importance of nurturing your entire marriage, your heads, your hearts, your hands, and your hopes. If you would like more information on the services and programs we offer, please call us at 801-747-2121 or go to our website at www.stressedmarriage.com.